What paranormal activities have you witnessed? I went with my best friend during high school for summer vacation to his grandparents who live in the countryside in Japan. I stayed in his mom's old room, which has a small wall closet. Just above this closet was a smaller closet door, like 1.5 feet tall and about 3 feet wide. Just above it. Weird design, but their house is old. The first couple weeks I was pretty jet-lagged, and Japan is hot and humid. So I didn't really sleep at night. If my light was off at night, though, I always felt uneasy about that small closet space. Something about it just felt darker than the rest of the room. Toward the end of the second week, I started to adjust to the time difference. One morning, I woke up and that small door was open. It was unsettling, but I closed it and just thought maybe it wasn't closed all the way and came loose. A couple nights later, I woke up feeling uneasy. It was dark and I could kind of see, and I could see that small door was open. It was much darker than the rest of the room, like black, pitch dark. This was the first and only time I experienced paralysis. I was too scared to move, say, or do anything. I just felt this darkness coming from there. I don't remember sleeping that night, but I must have because I remember waking up the next morning. I told my friend about it, who said his mom told him about something like that too. When we got back home, and I talked to his parents, his mom kind of joked with me, "So I heard you met the ghost." One weekend, I was at my dad's house. He'd come to the upstairs bathroom to get a shave and heard footsteps in my stepsister's room. I thought it was him walking around initially, so I got up to find him standing at her closed door. He looks back at me and whispers, "You can hear that too, right?" I nodded, and he opened the door slowly. My stepsister was asleep, and never had been awake apparently. There was no way she could have crossed the room, gotten in bed, and pretended to be that convincingly asleep in the 2 seconds it took my dad to open the door. He went in, checked her TV, which had never been on. She had one of those big ones from the 90s that would get warm when turned on. The radio hadn't been on either. Figured maybe it was the beat of a song or something. After that, we heard the footsteps a bunch of times, usually very early in the morning. Some of the footsteps were so heavy, they'd shake the ceiling fan of the dining room directly under her bedroom, and they'd woken her up a few times as well. Whenever I'd shower at my dad's, I always felt like someone was standing behind me. Eventually, I got so stressed and paranoid that I refused to shower at the house or even go into the upstairs bathroom. My dad asked me one day, "Do you ever feel like someone's in the shower with you when you're here?" After months of me feeling that way and never mentioning it to anyone. Burn that shit to the ground and condemn the land. Not me, but a security guard I employed when I ran a dispensary. She showed me the video. In fact, she sent it to me and I still have it on my phone. It's a camera mounted in her young daughter's room. She's playing on her bed, which suddenly slides away from the wall about a foot. The daughter then jumps off the bed and runs out of the room to tell her mom. Later, the daughter randomly got up, walked towards and out the front door while the mom was calling after her. Daughter snapped out of it once mom made physical contact. Daughter had no memory of how she got outside. Security guard calls a priest who literally goes by and tries to do like an exorcism on the apartment or whatever. About a week later, an electrical outlet behind a couch that she never used caught fire, and the whole apartment building burnt down. I'm usually a pretty big skeptic, but I don't know how to explain the video. Not sure if this is considered paranormal, but when I get fevers as a child, I would always, in my fugue and pain-infused state, hear a man counting in a very deep voice. He would count from 1 and up. As the numbers get larger, the voice gets louder and more intense. It started to get less frequent as I grew older, and now I do not experience it anymore. I've brushed it aside as a recurring nightmare until only recently. I've learned that my sister would experience the exact same thing when she was younger as well. It's not the scariest thing, but it does send shivers down my spine trying to comprehend this. When I was 3, I told my parents that my great-grandmother came to me in a dream and said her feet didn't hurt anymore. I think she had problems due to diabetes or something. She had died that night. They received the call shortly after I told them. Not paranormal, but a spooky coincidence. When I was 6, I slept on a bunk bed in a room alone. The bottom bunk was empty, was meant for my younger brother, but he was too scared of sleeping in a bed alone. So I was alone in that room that night. I remember a chilling feeling that night. Then it suddenly got really warm, probably because I was undergoing a night terror of some sort. Then I start breathing heavily, and open my eyes and see the room is empty. My little nightlight in the corner of the room comforts me back to sleep, except as I close my eyes, I felt a heavy hand petting my shoulder. My eyes rip open, and there was no one in the room. As soon as I lay back down, the petting continued, and I covered my head just pretending to myself that it was my mom. It took me 12 years to stop sleeping with my head under the covers because of that memory. My mom, of course, knew a woman passed away in that apartment before we moved in, so she always believed it was that woman trying to comfort me. I don't believe in paranormal activity, but my grandparents' house is considered by many to be extremely haunted. It's part of a tour of haunted houses in the LA area, and according to legend, was part of the inspiration for American Horror Story. There are tons of stories, but the one I experienced myself was when I was living there as a child. And I was about 6, and my older sister was 12, and we shared a room. My mom had decorated our bedside table with an antique telephone that didn't work and was not plugged in. My sister and I were asleep, and for some reason, we both woke up at the same time and turned to face each other. I remember feeling an extreme feeling of dread. Then the phone rang in between us. We locked eyes and both hid under our blankets till it stopped ringing. We both thought it was a dream because we didn't say anything for years about it. Then one day she was talking about it and we realized we had had the exact same experience. There are so many more stories, but that's the only one I experienced directly. I work in a cemetery. One evening I had stayed late to do some catch-up work. I was taking pictures of some granite samples to have on my phone and had already locked up. I was alone. As I was holding my phone, I heard the doorway to the basement swing open, slam shut, and heard footsteps go down the stairs. I froze. I thought for sure someone had come in. I called out to see if it was someone from maintenance. No reply. I got scared because if it wasn't them, someone had broken in. I stayed still for a bit and listened, then called out again. Nothing. Finally, I got brave enough to look. No one there. I peeked down the basement, empty. All the doors were still locked. My family's old house backed onto a pretty substantial forested ravine. I slept on the ground level floor and my room was at the back of the house. On 4 separate occasions over the span of 5 years, I saw a middle-aged man dressed in a flannel shirt, blue jeans, and a red hat walk through my room with a dog leash in his hand. He would briefly stop at the same spot every time and look around, then keep walking towards the ravine. I should note that this was fairly new construction in a suburb of a small city, and all that had been there previously was forest. I think he lost his dog in the ravine at some point, and he was there trying to find it. It's stories like these that make me think paranormal activity is just a past timeline that somehow got stuck in a loophole in a certain area. They're just entirely random. Like a random guy looking for his dog. For example, if I'm at home, sitting on the couch and typing this comment on Reddit, maybe in 100 years, someone will see a sort of echo of me doing this exact thing. At my mom's old apartment, I used to have this feeling I was always being watched. Then I was starting to wake up at 3 a.m. consistently. On one of the nights I had woken up, I heard someone call out my name. It was a woman's voice, but I didn't recognize it. She kept calling out my name and walking towards my bed, getting closer, but I didn't see anything. I freaked out, jumped off my bed, and ran into my brother's room. I hopped into bed with him and tried waking him up. The punk sleeps like the dead. He still sleeps like that. I heard her footsteps follow me until his doorway. After that, every time I woke up in the middle of the night, I just ran into his room and slept on the top bunk. We had bunk beds. My mother still doesn't believe that happened. Thankfully, we only lived there for a couple of months, then moved out. My dad was in hospital with a serious brain tumor. The hospital was about 40 miles from me, and he was in no shape to even keep awake. One night, I was chatting to a friend on MSN. Them days, yup. And he asked how my dad was. I turned to my left, and I saw him sat in his chair just looking at me. I replied, "Think he's okay." Sat in the room with me, to which my friend said, "Isn't he in hospital?" I looked again and nothing. I never mentioned it to anyone, told my friend I must have been seeing things. Dad survived and still here today. Cut to about 21 years later, and I met up with my dad, and just having a chat, he says, "Something been on my mind for years, son, and can't shake it off. When I was in hospital, I remember being at home sitting in my chair. You was on the computer, and you looked at me. Then I woke up in hospital, but it felt too real to be a dream. That's when I told him my experience.